Today I'm painting, hands down, the best Necromancer that has ever existed in Warhammer. Hey everyone, welcome back to Emblem of Doom Miniatures. I hope you've all been well, and recently I have had a bit of an urge to paint miniatures that are kind of out there and a bit different from what I usually paint, and also to paint miniatures that are quite large characters in the Warhammer the Old World setting. So for this week's video, how could I go past the Lich Master himself, Heinrich Kemmler? If you've been staying up to date with the channel, last year for Halloween you might have seen that I did my top 5 vampire counts or undead miniatures, and Kemmler placed pretty high up there. And after I made that video, I did have a few people reach out to me asking for more legacy armies to get painted on the channel. And I understand, I know I do paint a lot of Chaos Dwarves and High Elves and Dwarves and Empire now, but I really do want to focus on these smaller factions for you guys. So sit back and relax while I paint up one of the most iconic Vampire Counts minis ever created. The beauty of painting different sorts of miniatures from different armies all the time is that you tend to look into more lore about each miniature that you paint, and you kind of get a bigger picture of the overall setting of Warhammer the Old World. As you guys probably already know, Heinrich here is a bit of a bad boy and dabbles in some dark magic, which in turn has given him a bit of an extended life. For his skin tone, I want it to look unnatural and to also make him look a bit unwell, so I'm going to attempt some sickly purple toned skin. In the past I used some purple contrast over some pallid witch flesh for this, but it never gave me the finish I was after, so today I'm using a mix of cacophony purple and some heavy warm grey as my base. Don't get me wrong, contrast paints are a great tool and I love to use them, but I always struggle with finding satisfaction in their finish. I use contrast paints as a way to darken up my recesses, but when I do incorporate them into my painting and try use them on surfaces, I do find the finish really blotchy, and as this is a pretty big character to me, I want the finish to be as best as it possibly could be. So today, I'm just layering up through these pasty washed out colors until his crooked features are readable. Now some old miniatures do get a rap for being pretty basic and simple, but this old Kemmler miniature isn't basic or simple at all. There's actually a lot of detail to it, from the cape to his staff, even to his little poncho skin thing that he's got going on. There's a lot of elements involved with this miniature, so I wouldn't say painting this thing is going to be a breeze. When you have around 100 tiny skulls on the inside of a cape to paint, you know you're going to be in for a bit of pain. But I wouldn't have this mini any other way. I'll be adding a lot of bluish cooler blacks to this Kemmler, so I want pops of warmth peeking through here and there as points of interest. I start out by giving the inside of the cape a quick once over with some dried bark, and then roughly paint each skull with some Xandri dust. I'm not too concerned if I get some of this in the recesses, as I'm going to add a semi-watered down wash of Flesh Terror's red all over. As you can see, I'm tackling this hard to reach area first, because if I painted the areas around it, I would be absolutely screaming right now about the mess I'm making. I'm going to switch gears now and really try to focus on taking my time with the next part of this cape. I'm carefully going back over each skull with some more Xandri dust, and once I'm happy with that, I then highlight the top parts with some Morghast bone, and to finish I just do a spot highlight with some Morghast bone and white. Before we keep painting up this bad boy, I just want to quickly jump in here and say a massive thank you to Jim from Restor Hammer for supplying the miniature for this week's video. If you're a bit of a mini collector like myself and you sometimes find the grind of searching for Warhammer on eBay and Facebook Marketplace exhausting, check out Restor Hammer, as they have a pretty great range of Warhammer Fantasy and 40k minis and a bunch of other gaming systems as well. The link is in the bio, and after this video make sure you check them out, as I'm sure they'll have your next hobby project waiting for you. Kemmler's Cloak, or as it's known in the lore, the Cloak of Mist and Shadow, is a pretty powerful relic which allows the madman to travel across worlds and in between realms. It's one of a bunch of relics this Necromancer has collected over his long life, and it's a huge part of the mini, so I want to get it right. We've already made the inner skull part of the cloak pop, so I want the outside of this thing to be dark and menacing. I find the best way to achieve a good blend is by choosing colours that are similar, but each one is brighter in tone as you highlight up. As I'm painting, I mix each colour to get the transition seamless, and I try my best to cover less and less and have my highlights move towards the edges and top facing areas. Now black is a tricky shade to get right, and it's taken me around 2 years to get it to a spot where I feel comfortable tackling it. He wouldn't be much of a dark wizard without his staff, and oh boy do I love the design of this thing. How can you go wrong with some bat wings, a bird skull and a spear tip on a rotten twisted tree branch? It's absolutely perfect to me, and as I'm painting this thing, I'm slowly understanding why so many people love this miniature. I recently splurged and splashed out on a few new brown AK paints to try, and I've thoroughly enjoyed them. The coverage is great and they really do go hard. After a couple years of trying to cope with Citadel's dry, crusty paint lids, I'm at a breaking point because for some reason I keep not closing my lids on my browns properly, and I've had to buy Mournfang Brown like 3 times now, which is really annoying. I'm seriously considering swapping out most of my paints to dropper bottles, so if you have an easy and functional way on how to get the Citadel paints out and into some dropper bottles, let me know down in the comments below. I'd really appreciate it. Purple is really going to be my color of the day, and I'm making his Chaos Tomb Blade scabbard a deep purple just to tie into his skin. I don't paint this color that often, as not many of the main armies that I paint have this incorporated into their schemes, so it is nice for a change. The one feature on this old mini that kind of has me intimidated is his skin poncho, as I think it'd be really easy to make this thing look messy. So today I'm going to try something completely new and make up a new recipe of rotten flesh clothing off the top of my dome. I want the different sewn together patches of skin to be different colors, and I want one to be a lighter skin tone and the other to be a bit more of an olive skin tone, so I'm mixing in some tan earth to my rat skin as a base for the second skin color. Let's keep this purple theme going, so I'm going to give it a watered down wash of Magos purple, and this will hopefully add to the unnatural theme I'm going for. Next, I go back over the patches of skin with some rat skin flesh and the rat skin and tan earth base coats just like before, but this time I'm thinning out my paints and I'm kind of scratching it on the surface, and I'm doing this so I don't lose too much of that purple wash underneath, as I really like the effect. Like always, I'm taking my time with this and I'm working from my lighter skin tone and then I'm working on my darker skin tone. I feel like if I paint them together, I can adjust the highlights so they complement each other better. I'm now going to mix in some Cadian flesh to each of my base coat colors and start blending these to the raised areas of Kemmler's skin poncho. Again, I don't have much of this on my brush, just so it makes it easier to build these highlights up. We're getting close now, and it's time for some pure Cadian flesh, and I'm just going to use this over both the skin colors, and I'm trying not to cover much of the previous layers. I then add in some basic flesh tone from AK, which is a lighter flesh color, and if you don't have this, you could use something like Kislev flesh. I'm focusing this on where I think the light would hit, and to finish I do a small spot highlight of pure basic skin tone. To be honest, I was pretty happy with the finish of this. It wasn't too bright and out there, and I think it works well. As I've said a few times now, I want to inject a bit of joy back into my hobby and try to get out of the mindset that painting is a slog and a chore. Last year I struggled with some overly complex minis like my Slan Mage Priest and a few batch paints, but they did give me some clarity on what minis I want to have on my painting table. Minis that have huge amounts of character and lore like Kemmler give me a spark, and that in turn makes me look deeper into the history of this game. It's kind of like Pandora's box, and I open up a can of worms and spend many nights on Warhammer wiki pages researching before I go to bed. And I always go down rabbit holes to find what mini I want to paint next. Now that I have Heinrich Kemmler here, I need to paint the whole spooky gang and get my hands on Krell, and also finally paint up the great Necromancer sitting in a box behind me, Dieter Hellsnitch. It's a shame that the vampire counts won't be supported in the future of the old world. I do think there's a massive missed opportunity for Games Workshop to honour what came before and to build the old world game into something much greater than what they're allowing it to be. I know similar factions are in AOS, I just think there's a way that they can coexist and everyone can get what they want. But anyway, I'd love to know if you think I'm crazy or if you agree. Let me know. We are pretty much on the home straight, but there is still one major bit to paint, which is all the bones, and as you can tell, there is a lot to cover. If you've watched the channel before, you've probably seen my recipe, but today I'm tweaking it slightly and giving all the skulls and bone bits a base coat of dried bark and then painting over with my wraith bone, but I'm making sure to leave all the dried bark showing through on the eye sockets and any joints. I then mix up some contrast medium and skeleton horde, and I want the bones to be a bit more yellow today, so I'm adding in a tiny bit more skeleton horde than I usually do, and then I slap that all over the bones, making sure it pulls in all the recesses. Once that's dry, I go over the raised areas with some screaming skull, and I'm kind of glazing this to these areas so it blends in nicely with the skeleton horde wash. I then mix up 1 part screaming skull to 1 part bone white and apply this to the sharp edges and anywhere I think light will be hitting these bones. Let's give this old codger some greys, and I'm using a super simple recipe today for this. I'm just mixing up some black and stonewall grey and painting each strand nice and carefully. I then go for some pure stonewall grey, and I'm kind of painting this to the bottom 3/4 or the bottom half of the hair, and then I mix in some white and paint the tips of the hair to finish. I'm going to give his little skull cauldron some green flames, similar to warpstone or something like that. So first I put down some dark green as my base, then I draw some lines with a mix of dark green and warpstone glow. From here I move from warpstone glow down to moot green, and then I add a little bit of yellow to finish. I paint smaller and smaller lines towards the base of the skull. I want the bottom of the flames around the rim to be the brightest green. And after that was all done, it was time to tackle the true metallics, and as there wasn't much bling on this old geezer, it was an absolute breeze. For this, I did my usual layer, wash and highlight approach, and if you want to see more on how I do my true metallic metal, check out my classic Ruggled's Armored Orcs video where I go into a bit more detail. And that's pretty much it. Here is the Lich Master himself, Heinrich Kemmler. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end of the video, guys. I really appreciate it. And also a massive thank you to Restor Hammer for supplying a miniature for this week's video. I also want to say a massive thank you to my Patreons. You guys are the backbone of this channel, and I really appreciate all the support. If you want to join the Patreon, the link is in the bio, and we look forward to seeing you in the Discord. If you want to support the channel even further and Patreon's not for you, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, or maybe share this video with your friends. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, guys, I'm out of here. I'll see you all next time. Cheers.